Hi everyone and welcome to the Student Learning Support Service. My name is Lauren and in this module we are talking exam strategies. This is in two parts. In the first part I will talk about preparation. So what do you need to know, how you should organize your time and your study, and what you should do on the day of your exam. And in the second part we'll discuss some evidence-based revision strategies. These are based on cognitive psychology and neurology, so they make use of how our brains actually process information and remember stuff, and so they work. When it comes to exam preparation, the very best thing that we can do is to start early. Unfortunately, for revision techniques to really work, we have to start preparing before SWOT-VAC and certainly before the night before the exams. In an ideal world, this means spending an hour or two kind of going over your readings and rewriting your notes every week. But in a more realistic world, this does mean starting about 3 or 4 weeks before the exam. When you begin revising, there's a few important questions that you should ask yourself. Firstly, what topics will be covered? Check the course outline, compile a list of all of the key concepts and ideas that you need to revise, and try to keep these as discrete or small as possible. So chunk larger concepts down into smaller ones. Also think about what types of questions can you expect. Is your exam likely to be multiple choice? Is it likely to be essay, short answer questions, or open book? If you don't know, ask, or see if you can find some past exams that you can have a look at. What equipment are you allowed in the exam room? Sometimes you might be allowed special kinds of pencils or rulers, calculators, dictionaries. This information should be made available to you on the exam information page or your topic flow page, but if you are not sure, make sure you ask. Perhaps post on your flow discussion forums or send your tutor a quick friendly email to find out. The next really important question is it open book? If it is open book, pre-download the chapters that you need. Now this is super important because most ebooks have limited capacity. This means that only a certain number of students can have that text open at any one time. So if 100 of you are all trying to access that chapter at the same time during an exam, you're not going to be able to get it. So find out what you need and download it in advance. The library have guides on how to do this. So now let's have a look at how we can actually organize our time leading up to that exam. We're going to make the best of those 3 or 4 weeks that we have for revision. So I want to tell you about a technique called spaced practice. And this is where we split the amount of time that we dedicate to our revision over several sessions. So rather than studying content in one, say, 3-hour period, we might break up that study into 3 one-hour sessions over the course of a week. This is basically the opposite of cramming. When we cram, we increase the amount of information in our short-term memory, which sometimes does work if you're doing it the night before the exam, but not all of that information is going to make it into our long-term memory. It's just simply not how our brains work. Spaced practice allows our brains that time and space to process information and develop the patterns and pathways necessary to consolidate it. Studies show that students who space their learning don't just memorize it better, they demonstrate a deeper understanding of it. And if this isn't enough to convince you, studies also show that the same level of memorization can be achieved in a shorter total time when that same time is spaced out. So you can learn the same amount of information in 3 one-hour blocks spread out over a week than you would in that same 3-hour block or even a single 4 or 5-hour block. The tricky thing though is that spacing feels more difficult than cramming, and this is because information that is stored in our short-term memory. So when we cram, we feel in that moment that we can actually access more. But this is a little bit of an illusion. The thing that makes spacing really work, and this sounds very counterintuitive, but it's because it gives our brains time to forget. And this is actually really important because the harder that our brains have to work to retrieve that information. So if you've learned something in that first 1-hour session, then you try to retrieve it, remember it in that second. 1 hour session, we actually reinforce that information and that memory becomes stronger. The challenge of spacing basically dramatically improves our long-term memory. So remember, we're starting at least 3 or 4 weeks before our exam. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our timetable and start to break that up. So break big topics and concepts into smaller chunks and space them out into study sessions of about 2 to 3 hours across your calendar. This will make the most of your cognitive load, so the capability that your brain has to remember and concentrate and process information at any one period of time. Spaced practice also means reviewing information from previous sessions, but not immediately. Give yourself a couple of days, that time for your brain to process it. That's why we're going to come back a couple of days later. And remember to keep it flexible. Leave time for proper sleep, food, and exercise. If you want your brain to perform really well during exams, you need to treat it well. Sleep is super important for consolidating information. So don't stay up all night cramming. Just don't do it. Okay, so now that we've covered how to plan your time leading up to an exam, let's look at what to do in those spaced study sessions to make the most of the time that you have. Firstly, we're going to activate our notes. So this is where you should go through and organize that information. So have a look at your notes and apply active reading techniques to help you organize the ideas. So scan through the lecture notes to get a big picture of the main ideas. This might include looking at the contents page of a textbook, headings in an article, or lecture slides for your own notes. Use these to create your own revision notes. Create headings, subheadings, use color coding, use words and diagrams. Rewrite your notes into a condensed form. The process of summarizing and writing, not just reading, is super important. When we input and output information, we are forced to process it at a deeper level, and this leads to far better understanding and recall. You may also wish to try a note-taking strategy like Cornell notes. And I'm going to talk about how to use your notes in a very active way in part 2 of this module, exam revision strategies. So let's talk now about what to do on exam day. Firstly, remember your equipment. Your student ID, super important, but also remember what you are allowed, that pencil, that calculator, that dictionary. Do you need to bring a clear plastic bag to bring it all in? If you're online, have you downloaded those chapters that you need? Have you got your notes together and organized? Have you checked your Wi-Fi signal? Do you know what to do? Should something go wrong, go to the exam page on the Flinders website. So that's about just getting yourself sorted. When you're in the exam and you've got your reading time, there's a few things you can do to get yourself really prepared. Firstly, scan through the exam and note the number of questions and try to kind of estimate how much time you might need per section. Don't be too worried about this, but do just like kind of give yourself a little bit of a plan for how you're going to organize your time through that exam. Make notes on your scribble paper if you need to. Think about what concepts you feel most comfortable with, maybe do those first. If there's anything that you just remember that you're afraid that you're going to forget, say a major formula or something like that, jot it down on your scrap paper. Now during the exam, please, whatever you do, read the question properly. It is so easy to rush when we feel anxious in an exam, but it is so important to slow down or we might miss important keywords and instructions. We need to pay attention to our task words and our content words. So what is the question actually asking? Be aware of phrasing. Sometimes things can be written in a way that makes them seem negative when they're actually positive, things like that. Give yourself time to select a question, to plan and to write. Check the time after completing each section. Allow yourself time to proofread and breathe. Move on to the next section if you get stuck. In multiple choice exams, see if you can answer the question without looking at the choices. Don't choose too soon. Read the question and all options properly. Be aware of misleading wording. Take note of phrasing, things like choose the option that doesn't describe the following or choose the most correct answer. And if there's a penalty for guessing, leave it blank if you don't know the answer. If there's no penalty for guessing, don't leave it blank. And if you're stuck, try a process of elimination. For essay exams, sketch out your argument in dot points on your scrap paper during that reading time. Spend more time on your introduction and your topic sentences and your conclusion. A clear structure will enable your examiners to follow your argument more clearly. And if you run out of time, you can then use those dot points to outline your argument structure so your examiner will still get a sense of where you're going with your ideas. And finally, in open book exams, as I said, pre-download your readings or chapters before the exam so you don't run into problems with limited access. Find out if materials are limited to your notes, particularly to textbooks or readings. And remember that open book exams are often not as easy as they might seem on the surface. They often require you to locate and synthesize information and apply knowledge and analysis. So plan ahead. Keep your notes and your materials really organized. So that's it for part 1. In the next part, we're going to talk about some evidence-based revision strategies.